We talk so often about Paul and his evangelism efforts that were so critical to the development of the early church that it is easy to jump to the conclusion that he was the only one spreading the gospel. But in fact, there were others. Many we will never know. Some we know because Paul had differences with them. But there are some whose names we do know and whom Paul commended. Two names jump immediately to mind here: Priscilla and her husband Aquila, whom Paul met on one of his trips to Corinth. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, August 18th, 2023. We first meet Priscilla and Aquila in the 18th chapter of Acts. The first thing we read about them is this intriguing detail. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, he actually stayed with them, and they worked together. By trade, they were tent makers. So here's what we know about the situation from sources outside the Bible. In or around the years 50 or 51 AD, Claudius, then the Roman emperor, expelled all of the Jews from Rome. The ancient historian Suetonius reports that this was because of riots among the Jews. More specifically, there were conflicts within the Jewish community over differences of opinion concerning a figure he called Christus. Roman authorities took a dim view of anyone or any group that upset the peace. At this point in history, Christianity was still a Jewish sect, and the conflict within Judaism was whether Jesus was the Messiah or not. So Priscilla and Aquila found themselves in Corinth, refugees from Rome. It is significant that Luke, the writer of Acts, identifies them as Jewish. It doesn't tell us whether they were or weren't followers of Jesus, since pretty much all Christians at that time were Jewish. But it does mean that when Paul came to Corinth to witness to the Jewish community there, he would have immediately met them. Their bond was apparently cemented by the fact that they shared a common vocation, because, of course, like Paul, they were tent makers by trade, an occupation that would have made it easy to move around to new cities and continue making a living. Now here's where it gets interesting. Paul mentions them in 3 different letters: in Romans, in 1 Corinthians, and in 2 Timothy. And instead of calling them Priscilla and Aquila, he refers to her by her nickname, Prissa. And it is clear from context that, like Paul, they moved around a lot. In his letter to the Romans, he sends his greetings to them there. So by now they're back in Rome. In 1 Corinthians, he conveys their greetings to the church in that city. And in 2 Timothy, he sends greeting to them through Timothy, who was apparently at that time in Ephesus. All of which is to say that they were an important part of the network of Christian missionaries who traveled from city to city, preaching the gospel message and teaching the local churches what it meant to follow Jesus Christ. That Paul never mentions them as people with whom he disagreed means they clearly saw things eye to eye. Like Paul, they occupied a critical place in the development of the early church. The difference between them and Paul is that Paul left an important body of letters that were collected over the years and which, of course, became part of our canon of Scripture. It's possible, perhaps even probable, that Priscilla and Aquila also wrote letters. We just don't have any of theirs. And if they wrote any, their letters apparently didn't have the same, zing that Paul's did. But in every other way, they were undoubtedly as important to the success of the early church as Paul himself. Priscilla and Aquila are not the best known characters in the Bible, but the church was and continues to be built not on the shoulders of luminaries like Paul, at least not completely, as important as they are. The church is built on the shoulders of minor characters, and even the unnamed ones through the ages. Tomorrow, another unsung hero Epaphras. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.